welcome to the Dr. Pete Goldman Show. I'm super psyched to welcome Shadi to my show. As I mentioned to him before we went on the air just now, I'm not a big watcher of YouTube channels, but I watch his because it's great. So welcome, Shadi.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm very happy to be here.
So Shadi, first of all, besides judo, it seems like in your videos you have a knowledge of Aikido too. Are you trained in judo and Aikido or just judo?
First, I started Aikido. I got my black belt in 2018 under Christian Tissier Sensei. And from there, I transitioned to the world of judo and jiu-jitsu.
Okay, so you actually started judo in 2018.
Correct.
Okay. So what I wanted to ask you is, if you hadn't taken up judo, how do you think a black belt in Aikikai Aikido is with practical self-defense?
That's the thing. This is something I constantly discuss on my channel. And in order to understand, or at least try to understand what Aikido is, or what it can give to you, is to understand the path of the founder himself. I'll give you an example. You studied medical sciences and chiropractic medicine. Okay. Now you have a level of understanding, a level of maturity, whether it is in business or in life or your job as a whole. You cannot take a sixth grader and tell him, hey, I know this, and he's going to suddenly absorb all of it. That's just, he has to go through a lot of what you went through. Sure, can you make his path easier? Yes. But he has to go through what you went through in order to have the amount of knowledge, understanding, and maturity, and your perspective as a whole on life and business. The same when it comes to martial arts. We need to understand what he went through. He first was in the military. He went to war. He trained jiu-jitsu. He even, from what I know, I could be wrong, but he even did some judo as well. And then from there, through his vision, through his travel, he wanted to stray away from what is, using these techniques to actually break someone and kill and maim, to actually manifest peace. Some say, he has PTSD from war. He has this, he's seen a lot of stuff. It's very possible. But if you want to go by his visions and what he's seen, and all of a sudden, all these techniques that were to him once were used to create conflict or end a conflict brutally, to all of a sudden manifest, peace, or now we call it the art of peace for a reason. In my opinion, you should do something before Aikido, meaning you should understand conflict. You should understand resistance. It could be anything. It could be boxing, it could be kendo, it can be judo, anything. It doesn't have to be, it could be even freestyle wrestling, something that's not even Japanese, just so you can understand self-development, conflict, how to lose, how to get absolutely destroyed by someone, and how to completely dominate someone, both spectrum. And then finally come to terms with it, and then do Aikido. You will then understand it. But to not know absolutely nothing when it comes to martial skills and only do Aikido and expect to have all this confidence, all this willingness to, step in and really be the person that people need in dire times. Is that a correct term? Dire.
Yes.
I personally think that's not very possible. With judo, I learned more about Aikido after I have left. And if things go wrong, whether sometimes even a little conflict on the street, not necessarily physical, or, me in general, when I'm handling things in life, I found that through randori, through conflict, through sparring, because what is randori or rolling, what you guys call it? It's a situation that's constantly turning and changing, and oftentimes it's not in your favor. You have to adapt, and you have to finally find a solution, no matter how bad your situation is. And from there, you progress. And that's how taking on life, everyone says it's, the way you act on the mats, it will reflect life and vice versa. So I would say no. It would give it a short answer. But I said all this just so people can understand that we need to understand his progression, his the way he saw things and the way he lived his life, and not just go to the end and just practice his. Unless we live in a utopia where all of us just do Aikido and not seeking fights and crimes, then yeah, just do it.
Let me ask you this. That's an excellent answer, by the way, and I understand it. Your average Aikikai Aikido teacher these days in Europe, Japan, and the US, how many of them do you think understand and agree with you and express that to their students? Or how many of them say, forget that, I'm teaching you Aikikai Aikido, and if you stick around and get a black belt, you can defend yourself on the street?
Oh, I'd say there's a lot. If you see, for example, many brochures I open up here, for example, for this club or that club, or other countries as well, they would say it's a great practice. It's great for all ages, for men and women, and they always add, and it's great for self-defense, or it's a tool to defend yourself. However, if you go, for example, to Sacre Tissier, outside of Japan, he's like the best. Everyone would agree. It's actually not far from here. It's in Vincennes, and his brochure says something completely different. He says that it's a way of connecting. It's a way of I'm paraphrasing. It's a way of harmonizing, and it's to kind of annihilate an attack. That's it. So if you read the founder's words about nullifying an attack, and what he says, the harmonizing and the brochure, he said I would say Christian Tissier is the only one that truly says that, yeah, it is a practice for you, it is for your self-development, and it ends there, indirectly. But yeah, all the others, it's self-defense, it's too dangerous, etc. Sure, there are techniques that are, yes, they're hella dangerous. And I've covered one just yesterday or 2 days ago, the Daitorio Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, which is the founder or the predecessor. There are techniques that you truly can suffer a lot of great injuries to multiple joints in just one throw. So now, obviously, the training methodology helps. For example, if you look up old jiu-jitsu books, you would see that there is a randori section, which is, the sparring, the free practice, what we call rounds of sparring. And you see the techniques there. What you do in judo, it's your side control, your side headlock, osotogari, ippon seoinage. And then there's the self-defense section, which was live drilling, scenarios, someone coming from behind. So if you see Aikido's approach a little bit, it's kind of emulating or a little bit doing like those self-defense stuff, and involving the knife, involving sneak attacks from the back, from the side. So it is a part of the old curriculum, but it is heavily missing. So if you add randori, like we do in judo, and all the drilling, and then the live drilling, not just doing it in a static way, but also doing it lively, someone sneaking up on you, actively training this, or striking correctly with a rubber knife, etc. I think you can create a good fighter, someone who is stressed in sparring, and then add those live drills and those scenarios, and just like Hickson and just like Helson, they do all these, right?
Yes.
But if you add the stand-up, also, I think you can somewhat be as close as possible to what the past used to be, at least from my observation. But to say that it is dangerous and train the way today they train, it is absolutely false. And to begin to explain it, you need heavy historical knowledge.
So the Aikido teachers that say, no, this is self-defense. I'm teaching you practical self-defense. There's two. Listen, I'm a fighter. I've been doing martial arts since I'm 10 years old. So, and I've done quite a few. The two scenarios, it's not that I'm doubting anything, but the two scenarios I wonder about, among others, but two of the scenarios that I wonder about, the Aikido teacher saying, no, this is good. The first is against a very vicious boxer who's just not grabbing their wrist or grabbing their gi, is just, has a little distance and just is attacking them with brutal punching combinations to the face and body. And the second is a very good wrestler, like especially like a Midwestern American wrestler who is going to start 4 feet away and double leg them and take them down and do whatever he wants to them. So I'm just wondering, from your knowledge, those teachers who are saying, oh, this is practical self-defense, how do they think that they are dealing with those two scenarios?
They're going to say that what we train for is not MMA. You know, when you train for MMA, wrestling, Thai boxing, you know, it's very patterned and the street is chaotic, which is true. But they tell you that, you know, attacks on the streets are not going to be a double leg or like a boxer stance or just stay away, or they give you all sorts of excuses, which is true. A lot of people just do that because they don't want to face it. So let's say, for example, like the old jujitsu that I just talked about and how they trained. Let's say I do know the Aikido wrist locks and the strikes that they do. And then if someone double legs me, then there's that randori section that I talked about, where there is a lot of ground grappling and the stand up. So it's all coming together. But this is why I said that if you only take one part and say that it's going to work, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So a lot of people, yes, they do delude themselves, giving excuses either to themselves or their students, saying like, "Oh, the stuff you see in MMA, it's, you know, it's combat sports, but street fight, there's no rule, there's no double legs, it's just a slash of the knife or like a big slap, and that's it." But yeah, it's mainly you either delude yourself or you lie to your students.
Okay.
Okay.
So just switching gears a little bit, I think you made a video either exactly on this or kind of on this.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my question, switching gears a bit. When the Gracie family, I think it was in around 1914, started learning from Count Koma judo, it looks to me, if you look at old videos of Elio Gracie and Carlos Gracie Sr., it looks to me like they're doing judo, just judo. It just looks like judo, like exactly like judo. Now, there is a contention that they switched the leverage on some of the positions. They made it more applicable for the street, et cetera, and that became Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So when I look at that, on one hand, I think to myself, man, if you look at the original videos of Elio and Carlos Sr., it just looks like judo, so I actually don't see any difference. But on the other hand, in the early 90s, there was some Vale Tudo in Japan where there were some of the entrants were some decent Japanese judo fighters, and they did lose to the Gracies. So it appears like there is some difference there. So what do you make of that? What do you make of the fact that it looks like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is basically judo, but on the other hand, they must have refined it somehow because they got very good at it, defeated most others, at least in the early 90s, until people got more well-rounded, and even defeated some pretty good judo guys. So how do you look at that whole equation?
Now, first of all, let's go back to Maeda. Maeda was teaching self-defense, and he was teaching Jacinto Ferro, I believe, which was also hand-to-hand combat for the police. Jacinto Ferro. This is what he was invested in. So the self-defense aspect came from Maeda. If you see Maeda's book, I've discussed it multiple times on my channel. It's self-defense jiu-jitsu, and the stuff that even today Rickson is doing through his application, or in the old black and white footage of the Gracies, they're doing stuff from Maeda's book. So to say that made it more applicable for the street, that's not entirely the case. Then later on came many judokas. It didn't stop at Maeda. Later on came many judokas like Takeo Yano. Came the Ono brothers who were taught by Kanemitsu. Kanemitsu was a great ground fighter. As far as we know, him and his student invented both the triangle choke and the knee bar. So to say that they took something and they just evolved it, there's not that much. For example, if you talk with Valente brothers, they would show their appreciation to judo, and they will tell you just how much they follow judo to a T. And back then they followed the old rules, which was the throw did not end the fight. And so a lot of the time they did go on the ground. If you read the old records, even prior to Gracie and the late 1800s, a lot of the fights would just go on the ground, or if someone was lost by a throw, it was via KO, or they cannot just go on anymore. So now let's go forward to the 90s and Rickson. Rickson was a monster. There's no doubt about it. They're a very talented family. And to say that they invented something, so that's why they beat them, it doesn't have to be the case. Like, for example, now if I watch a judo world championship and the Russians beat the Japanese team, does that mean they invented some type of art? Or not the case. Now, if you go to Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, especially like, are they adding little details? Are they working from generation to generation because it's been there decades? Of course, everyone's gonna do something. They're gonna progress a little bit, but to say that it became something completely different, I would say no. Everything evolves.
Could you almost argue that the Gracie family preserved what judo was like, we'll call it 100 years ago, and they've just continued to preserve this very well-rounded fighting art where you can fight on the ground, fight standing up, throw the person, continue the fight, and maybe modern judo, and I'm not an expert in modern judo, but maybe modern judo has become quite sportive. And you look at a guy like Rickson, which you referenced before, and actually I've adjusted him many times, so I'm friends with him. With that said, do you think that Rickson, you could argue, is just almost like this incredibly well-trained and hard-working judo fighter?
If Rickson had the sophistication and the throwing techniques like the old generation and even today, then I would say yes. But if you see his application, he teaches like Ogoshi and Kosotogake, very basic, or Horion's VHS. It's a very basic. It's just a way to get to the ground, and I get their style, I get their philosophy. But now, if you go to any jiu-jitsu school, like the No-Gi 10th Planet, nobody's doing like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Nobody's doing like all judo. They're interested in taking the back, leg locking, and winning in MMA or No-Gi or ADCC or whatever it may be. But as far as the Gracies, yeah, they're very close to what things used to be. But as far as the curriculum as a whole, you need very sophisticated stand-up to get as complete as possible. Like they're in, and it's very highly respected. Like there's a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu school in Osaka where I used to live, and the Japanese have a great, they have a great admiration for Rickson. I've seen a Japanese documentary on him. So I would say, yeah, you need highly sophisticated throwing technique like today's judo, and if you train with invisible jiu-jitsu, like Rickson calls it, with the fundamentals and the basics mastered to a high level, and the self-defense drills and the way they train, I would say, yeah, you're very close to what the past used to be.
Question: when it comes to, you mentioned before that some of the judo type throwing techniques taught by Rickson and Horion, they're kind of basic, but you said, like, look, I know they're just trying to get,
but they work.
Right. I'm trying to get the person on the ground. I understand that. So here's a question for you. As part of my own jiu-jitsu journey, I trained quite a bit with Carle Gracie, who's the 11th out of 21 kids of Carlos Sr., and he's the father of Clark Gracie. And he's a 9th degree red belt. So he's obviously a very good source for Brazilian Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
And it's not that he's unfamiliar with judo throws, because he's probably in his early 70s now. So he came from that generation in Brazil where they were doing a lot of judo practice, or whatever their version of that was. But what I'm getting to is what he really prefers to take someone down in a self-defense situation, because he teaches mostly self-defense, not really sportive stuff. He likes the Gracie clinch. So again, as you know, there's many ways to get someone to the ground. You can sweep them with a Muay Thai technique. You can do a advanced judo throw. You can be an American wrestler. You could, there's a lot of ways to get someone on the floor. But at least Carle Gracie, he would show us kind of this Gracie clinch, and then that to him, even if he was going against a good judo guy or even against a good wrestler, he was confident he would take them down with the Gracie clinch. And even Rorion would say back in the day, I saw an interview with Rorion many years ago when Fedor was beating everybody up in Pride. And Fedor had already beat up Nogueira and, whatever, who was a pretty spectacular representative for jiu-jitsu in MMA.
Right.
And someone said to Rorion,
and Ogawa.
Exactly. Someone said, if you were coaching, a fighter against Fedor, what would the strategy be? And Rorion said, close the distance, clinch, takedown, submit. Now, whether that could happen, I have no idea. Probably against Fedor, no, in his prime. But even at that period, Rorion had the confidence in the Gracie clinch that's the way to take someone down. So with all that said as an introduction, I'm wondering, when you look at the hierarchy, I don't know if hierarchy is the right word, when you look at the effectiveness of all the ways to take someone down, what are your thoughts on the Gracie clinch?
It's simply effective. That's all you can say. And something like a double leg or a single leg and a Gracie clinch, it's much easier to learn than a sophisticated judo throw like Uchimata, Ouchigari, the Deashibarai, which is the foot sweep. They take years and years and years and years to develop. But something like a Gracie clinch, if I drilled it every time I go on the mat for a year, let's say I'm a Gracie student only, you can be very effective in it. And in judo, for example, that's one thing. Just like boxing, in judo, if you go and hug the guy, unless you immediately attack or there are many ways to counter the clinch. It's not saying like, if you clinch the judo guy and the Gracie clinch, that's it, they're finished. No, they can turn around. They can even sweep the double leg with the Haraigoshi or many things. There are. But what I'm trying to say is, if someone wants to learn self-defense and quick and they have no takedown game, then going for something like a double or a Gracie clinch, because it's much safer, because you're not going down and possibly missing those legs. They can just simply push you back. I'm talking self-defense. Or you're exposing the back of your head and the back of your neck. The Gracie clinch, kick on the knee and then go clinch. It's one of the best things you can do. Yeah.
Excellent. Let's talk about the guard. And as my introduction for us to talk about the guard, this is what I would like to say. So first of all, we know that whether it's a closed guard or a type of open guard, we know that the guard has been around judo for a long time. It's not as if anyone is pretending that the guard was invented later. The guard's been around for a long time. I think you made some videos about that. I think you even showed some old school US collegiate wrestling where they were using
the NCAA.
Exactly. So the guard's been around. Now, when it comes to, let's say, advanced techniques of the guard, and by the way, when I say advanced techniques, it could be, Helio Gracie having a great closed guard and having a great cross choke from the bottom, or it could be some 2023 version of some, butterfly guard or open guard that's done EBCC. Do you look at it like, well, this is an interesting evolution and it has its benefits, but if people really just looked at and learned the old school judo guards, they're more than fine in a real self-defense situation? Or do you think, no, these evolutions of the guard are kind of worthwhile in some way?
Are you talking like evolution of guard stuff like lapel guard, rubber guard?
All that stuff.
I think even the Gracies would tell you just don't need that pish posh. So now when it comes to self-defense, you're not going to be wrapping around the lapel, around the leg, and with the, you're just not going to do that. Rubber guard, I don't know, like even going to the ground, period, like outside, just try to avoid it as much as you can. Even if you see, you hear Henner and Hiron telling you this, but you know, in a close situation, in a room all by yourself, maybe a woman, God forbid, she's getting assaulted, then yes, your guard is your best friend. But all you need, yes, is a basic open guard and a closed guard. If you see Matamoros won, the first Matamoros, Kron Gracie against Sousa, for me, that was the best jiu-jitsu match ever. That match was a masterclass in classical open guard by both of them. And just classical pass, the way Tsunetane Oda do it in the old footage. And he just passes Sousa's guard the same way, like he crosses grip the lapel, gets behind, gets the armbar. It's the Rickson guard pass. It's the same one. You see Oda doing it back in the day. There's nothing better than that. Even Gordon Ryan, you see him, just a classical butterfly guard. You also see Kimura and his friends in the old DVD. They're also doing a butterfly guard pull and then sweep. And then from there you pin or you take the back. It's the basics go a very long way. Like all the stuff, lapel guard, rubber guard, or attacking from a bad position like buggy choke. People are getting slammed, are popping their knees, are if you get stuck constantly in side control, then you need to attack like the fly trap, like Tense Planet or buggy choke. I saw a Tense Planet guy getting slammed in the ADCC trials because in ADCC, if you are trapped in a submission from a bad position, you are allowed to slam. But if you have someone in side control just slamming them or a closed guard and slamming them, no, you're not allowed. So having your fundamentals narrowed down, it's the best way possible. Like you constantly hear this by Henner and Rickson, it's the stuff that you want to be doing when you're 80 years old, when you're 70 years old, the stuff that you can actually apply in self-defense. All that new stuff, sure, they have their time. The berimbolo is fun. It's fun to watch. I've even pulled it once or twice, just having fun. But to say that it's my secret weapon to go and become a great champion, not necessarily. Are there people making great names for themselves using them, like Cornelius, Mizumechi? Sure. But if you want to be out, like you can be a world champion in anything using the classical stuff, and great in self-defense too.
Okay. When you mentioned not going to the ground in a street scenario, which I understand, and I don't disagree with, I'm with you. I just want to ask you, if someone is trained in judo or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and they are in a street self-defense situation where someone's threatening them, the person appears to be a boxer of some type, they don't want to exchange punches with this person, which of course would keep it standing up, but they don't want to exchange punches. So they will just say, clinch them and take them down and try to survive in some way, maybe put them to sleep or whatever. Is that a scenario where you would say, no, that is a good time to go to the ground because you don't want to stand up with this guy who's trying to box you? Or do you think even this guy who's trying to box you and you're actually good on the ground, but just still stay off the ground? How do you look at that equation for self-defense?
Is it like a 100% no, don't go to the ground when it comes to streets? No, obviously not. Every street fight is different and every street fight has its own techniques. But, for example, be mindful of your surrounding. For example, if you don't see anyone within the vicinity of 30 meters, I'll say, if you want to go to the ground with a guy, hey, just go ahead, But also there are ways to go to the ground, but you have to be also aware that you need to disengage at any moment because you don't know. For example, a knee on belly is great. It's a great way to disengage clearly and also show dominance. And it's very painful if you put your knee on the diaphragm. So, for example, there's a book of, I believe in somewhere around 1912. There's a choke that was done from the knee on belly. You grab both lapels and then you pull like close to the neck. So when you pull, you actually lift the head and you're putting the knee high here on the diaphragm. So it's a great choke and you can just disengage whenever. And, you can basically put that someone in your belly and get them to say uncle as a joke, but show that, hey, I can, don't try to do anything because I can easily hurt you. So unless they're clearly adamant, and you can read someone's character during a fight. They either just trying to act like tough, or they're really adamant on hurting you and even possibly killing you. That's something else. You have to read it. You have to read your surrounding. You have to read the person. Every fight is different. But is it like, as in no way, shape, or form go to the ground? Not necessarily.
If one thinks that this person does mean to do them harm, like you just alluded to, and they think actually the surroundings don't look that safe to go to the ground. So they're in an interesting situation because this person looks like they're going to start striking. They don't want to really box this person, so they don't really want to stand up. They are pretty good on the ground. They think, oh, if I clinch this person and take this person down, I'll probably be in a better position. But like you said, there may be the surroundings, it doesn't appear like it's a good idea. It doesn't appear that it's a good idea to go to the ground. What are some things that someone can do to keep it standing up, but not turn it into a boxing match with someone they think they very well might lose to?
Well, this is the power of a good takedown. A good takedown, which can not necessarily just maim someone or bump their head off the asphalt. Just a very good takedown that gives you enough time to just run away or solidify your dominance. Like, they're not, when they get up, they're not going to be as strong. So you have to do some type of damage, especially when they're really meaning to hurt you, possibly even kill you. A good takedown is where it's at. Like, you've seen those street fights where someone hits a hip toss or something basic, like those kosotogake that Hoist used to do, where you clip the leg from the outside and you just go down with them. And sometimes that's more than enough.
Great. That's a great answer. I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
Switching gears again a little bit to leg locks, knee bars, foot attacks. Now, let's go over the history a little bit. Number one, I don't know how many thousands of years grapplers have been attacking the legs, but probably thousands. Then you have Sambo, however long that's been going on in Russia. Then you have just judo. Then you have like the old school, like Elio Gracie footlocks. Right. And actually, speaking of France, where you are, Moishe Feldenkrais, before he became a guy who was doing more like body work and healing, he was in France in the 1930s doing very high level judo. And I have one of his books where you see some really cool footlocks.
Now, I have to see that.
Oh, great book. When we finish, I'm going to get you the link. You definitely want this
Great
book. With that said, then you have like modern day Abu Dhabi, or you have modern day like Gordon Ryan or the Danaher group, which is like very footlock heavy. So with all that said, with that brief history that I just laid out, what are your thoughts on footlocks?
Footlocks are something great to know. Obviously, the more you learn, the better for you in general. They're competitively, they have their place, as we can see from today what's happening, and even in self-defense, they do have their place. But we have to differentiate between the two. If you see, like, again, we have to reference the old judo books, like, for example, My Method of Judo by Kawaishi. Kawaishi also came here to Europe. You can see, I believe the book is, I might be wrong, but it's from the either 20s or the 30s. There's a bunch of footlocks. You see the calf slicer, you see the straight footlock, you see the toe hold. You even see an inside straight footlock. He even gives a note at the bottom that you can actually turn it to the other side and becomes a knee torsion leg lock, which basically a heel hook. There's also in the Tiger Scrolls, you see someone entangling the legs and pulling on the heel like this, which becomes a heel hook, kind of like the new Mikey lock. you also see in the old Iguchi's books, you see in Ashigarami. So they give you a competitive one where both of you are on the ground, you're pinning the hips, and there's no striking involved. So learning that is great. But also in self-defense, if you see the demonstrations or if you see the photos, you'd see Ashigarami was performed standing up. Ashigarami is a submission, not just the position. Also, even the straight footlock. You see the Gracie ankle pick when someone hugs you from behind. You bend over, you grab the heel and pull it up, and he grips it so it becomes like a crossed, not straight footlock, and then turns around and then just yanks it. So in self-defense, maybe you want to calf crush the guy or even just pop the leg in general because you probably know who he is. You probably know why he's here. Whoever, again, you have to read the person. Doing a footlock standing up, again, it's a great way to disengage. It's quick because the lever is so short, and it's just there. You're gonna guarantee they're not getting back up. So it has its place competitively and also in self-defense.
Excellent. It's interesting. We were talking just about like the brief history of footlocks. I think about how different moves in jiu-jitsu, the credit for the founding, or judo, jiu-jitsu, etc., grappling, the credit for the founding of those moves is often so inaccurate. Let me give you two examples, just kind of interesting if you want to comment on it. So the first one is what's known as the Americana. The Americana.
Yeah.
Now, if you read certain books about the history of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, they say, we never knew this. We never saw this in judo. We were never taught this. We did not do this. But Bob Anderson, who was a wrestler, became friends with Rolls, which is R-O-L-L-S.
Hollis, yeah. And taught it to him.
Right. It's actually pronounced in Brazil, Halish. It's Halish, but they, it's Halish. That's his name. But we'll call him Halish because that's the correct pronunciation from what I've been told. So supposedly Bob Anderson taught this to Halish, and then it became part of the curriculum. But then you can watch like 1912 old black and white videos of judo guys doing it.
Yeah.
So it's just funny that there's a large percentage, or I don't know about the large percentage, there's plenty of grapplers in this world that think the history of this is from wrestling, when meanwhile it was in judo for years. So that's one. And another one, and you can comment on both or anything about so-called history of moves, but another one is the triangle choke. Because
which one?
The triangle choke.
Okay.
Because speaking of Halish, there's another story that Halish was training, I think, with Elio, and they just had some judo book from Japan, and they were like, look, and they read in this book the triangle, and they started doing the triangle. So the way the triangle came into Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was just from some book that they had picked up, which may be so. But I actually have, you'd like this, I have a book about grappling from ancient Greece. It's like they look at all these pictures that are like 2,000 years old from Greece in stone carvings, and they're clearly doing triangle chokes. Clearly doing triangle chokes. So they're doing triangle chokes, 2,000 years ago in Greece or whatever it was.
Can you take a picture of the triangle choke from that book?
Absolutely. I'll even send you the link to get the book. It's a nice big.
Thank you.
It's great. I'll get you the Feldenkrais link and also the Greek.
Moshe and the Greek book. Okay, great.
Yeah, the Greek book. Yeah. So it's just interesting how, it's nobody's fault. Everyone, people are doing their best.
Yeah. They didn't have internet.
It's not like people are trying to make up stories, but it's just so interesting about the so-called evolution of these. Because listen, the human body can only be put in so many positions with the arms, the choking, the legs. So if there's been martial arts all over the world for thousands of years, it's not totally surprising that people have done these things or some version of them.
Yeah, Sadakazu Uenishi's book, you can see in 1905 he's doing it. He's even doing the cross choke like close to his chest and with the butterfly guard or an open guard. Kind of like when Crone said the Japanese, they did it from far and they use strength. while my grandfather put him close, and just that's not accurate actually. But yeah, again, if I've compared many grappling arts from around the world with judo, and the human body is one. So can you come up with this technique here and then in another continent? Of course. But triangle choke, as far as I know from Japan, it's a very recent. You can see a primitive version in Kawaishi's book, which is like a scissoring the legs. It's not so much like, but it's like a head scissors of the head and the arm. So you're scissoring the head and the arm like this. While in 1926, in Kanemitsu's book, you can see he's doing it in today's sophistication.
When it comes to various martial arts, whether it's Thai boxing, Kyokushin karate, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu, boxing, etc., etc. Obviously, you've enjoyed Aikido, you enjoy judo, you're very knowledgeable about other things. That's what you happen to have picked.
Right.
Do you think that, let's say someone is just a very good boxer, I mean, they don't really know how to fight on the ground because they just never really paid attention to that. But they're a very good boxer. They're very athletic. It's kind of hard to keep them down because if they're taken down, they can kind of stand back up well. Do you look at boxing and Thai boxing as, just as valid as judo and jiu-jitsu? It's just that to each his own, and some people enjoy striking and some enjoy grappling? Or do you look at it like you respect those things, but you think ultimately grappling is a better idea because these strikes can be nullified once they've been thrown or are pinned or something like that?
To say like it's a completely superior, etc. I wouldn't say that. I don't have that attitude personally. Like, oh, jiu-jitsu is the best. Just take them down. At the end of the day, it's two guys at the gym, courteously sparring. But on the streets or wherever, like, if I kept you at bay, the grappler, and I just swang at you and finished you off, then who's better? Is now jiu-jitsu less effective than I don't know, Sabat? Or no? Every technique works, and it works in a particular context. If you're twirling a knife and you have a gun pointed at me at the same time, now judo will not work, or whatever. Now I just need like an AR-15. But to say that one is superior, I personally prefer grappling because it's just so rich. But these arts are tested. These like Thai boxing or Muay Thai, kickboxing, etc. They're tested. There's resistance. There's sparring. There is great conditioning. There is the taste of defeat and victory. So obviously they're great. And if you go out, something happened, you just swing at a guy. Yeah, it's great. But legally speaking, especially here, you want to avoid, punching someone and having their head, fall on the ground and hitting the ground, it's, or like, which is better to see, a policeman putting someone down and just hammering down with punches like Henner shows because of lack of training, or you see a very good police officer, a good grappler police officer turning someone, controlling them without causing any harm? Which is better to see?
Excellent point. You mentioned a little bit before about like training on the mat and life. And of course, it's been mentioned many times, not just in judo, not just in Aikido, not just in jiu-jitsu, that when someone is training, it helps them. It helps them in their life. It helps them with their mentality, their emotions. Right. So this is the question. It's kind of obvious that if someone is really well-trained, it's going to help them in so many ways in their life. We don't even have to list them. That's just obvious. It makes you concentrate better, makes you more confident, et cetera, et cetera. You get into a little bit of a problem or you used to problem solving, it helps your brain. That's obvious.
Yeah.
What I've heard though, and I wonder your opinion on this, some people actually say, and it may be true, that when you're a martial artist, it's actually a spiritual path. So I'm past the mental, I'm past the
Yeah.
emotional. I'm talking like actual spirituality. Now,
Right.
some people would look at that statement and say, give me a break, stop kidding yourself. If you want to be spiritual, go ahead, go on a spiritual quest, have a
Right.
spiritual path, but don't pretend your martial arts are making you spiritual, although it might help you emotionally or mentally, etc. But
Right.
others say, no, when you do martial arts properly, it is a spiritual practice. How do you look at that whole conversation?
Uh, the term spiritual is very broad, but if we want to talk about, being in tune with yourself or your true self, yes, because it does, especially through losing, when you lose a lot, and especially if you are someone that's constantly thinking about, if you are someone that says, oh man, I did this in the past, or oh man, I shouldn't have said that, or, constant, or instead of being like, I don't care, constantly someone striving to be better, something like martial arts does help. It shaves off that frustration because when you're frustrated, when you're weak, when you are helpless in life and on the mats, and then you learn to grow past it, it's going to create a kinder person. There's no way about it. I'm not talking about competitive people, and I'm just talking about someone who just trains, like the vast majority of people. It's going to create a more, centered person, a more kinder person because, when we lose, especially when we first start and you're getting dominated and tapped out and thrown, it's going to have that feeling of like that, that child tantrum where you have no control over nothing and you just want to scream and cry. And, when kids do that, obviously as an adult, you don't do it. But I'm talking about a feeling similar to that because a child is the most helpless thing on earth, or between humans. But when you do train martial arts, and then shaves off that frustration and then gives you all that power and then gives you all that control over yourself and others, if need be, you will become kinder. You will, if you are striving to be a better person, it will help you. So to me, spirituality and martial arts is uh, becoming a kinder person, especially when you are the person that any situation needs, you step in and then you do your role and you help someone through something if you need, not necessarily fighting. Like if you see someone, being harassed on the street, no, it can be your friend, it can be your brother, your wife, your sister. Uh, you need to be that centered person because you went through all that frustration and that defeat to when you see someone falling apart, you need to be that standing person.
Excellent. I want to ask you a question about the notion of when you're training. So, meaning you're in the dojo or academy, you're doing judo or jujitsu or aikido, or if you're in a street self-defense situation and you're like, man, I have to use this stuff. Now, let's just say we take a polarity. We'll say on this end of the polarity, someone is very tense. They're very like tight and tense and super tense. That probably is not helpful to anything. And the other side of the polarity, someone is super relaxed, but they're too relaxed. They're like spaced out. They're like half asleep. That's
Right.
probably not incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of stuff in between where someone could be relaxed but still strong.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at a great boxer like Floyd Mayweather, you can see that he's in the middle because Floyd Mayweather is not fighting stiff. He would not be effective. And he's also not fighting half asleep because he would lose. But he's relaxed, but he's strong. He's relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so we can all agree, I think, or me and you can agree, and I think most people would agree, it's most effective, whether it's martial arts or life or whatever, to be in between, to be relaxed and strong.
Yeah.
Do you think that state of being relaxed and strong is something that just happens as you train more and more? Or is that something that you should mentally remind yourself or strive for, or
Yeah.
say to myself, okay, well, let me take a deep breath. Let me be relaxed. I'm still aware. I'm awake. I'm concentrating. I'm full of energy. Nonetheless, being relaxed is important. I'm
Yeah.
going to kind of remind myself to relax. Or do you think that this training, like we're doing, just kind of defaults you to the proper state of relaxation?
I wouldn't say it defaults you. No, we constantly need the reminder. It's not like I'm gonna, you're gonna lose control over a situation, whether you're gonna be way too heavily emotionally invested in something, or way too objective about something, where you kind of need to be a little bit more soft. For example, if you're being too hard on your kid in their studies, it's not just like if you don't do this, you're gonna fail, like a lot of parents do. Sometimes you need to be a little bit softer, be on your kid's side, see what's happening. Or sometimes you need to be emotionally uh, more intelligent if you're dealing with something in your personal life, romantic life. No, I think we should constantly remind ourselves of that. Always, that's why they say, breathe or meditate or go on a walk and think about these things. But I think martial art is the tool that gives you that power to actually do it. For example, we all want to be strong. We all want to be that. I'm talking about uh, the genuine population that wants to do good. We all want to do good, but not all of us has the tool. Not all of us has the character strength or the emotional strength to do. Martial arts does help with that. But regarding the decision, you have to constantly remind yourself.
Excellent. What about as we're starting to wrap up here? What about when it comes to the martial artist wanting to feel good, be healthy,
Right.
be prepared to train, recover, etc. Let's talk just a little bit about rest, a little bit about eating. Now, I know you're not a nutritionist, you're not a dietitian, but
Yeah.
you have your educated opinions, and
Mhm.
the fuel the body can benefit from somebody who trains a lot. Now, obviously, there are some people who are vegetarian, and they'll tell you why it's good to be vegetarian. There's some people who are vegan. They'll tell you, hey, you should be vegan because of X,
Yeah.
Y. Now there's some people who are on what's called the carnivore diet, and they only eat meat, and they will tell you why that's actually quite healthy for you, and that's actually
Yes.
a natural way to eat. And then there's people who might be somewhere in between. They have a little meat, they have some chicken, they have some fish, they have some vegetables, they have some grains.
Mhm.
As a martial artist,
Uh-huh.
what are your thoughts for just some good, I'm not saying diet tips or an exact diet, but just some ideas you have about eating?
Okay. This is something that was discussed by Maeda in his book. I did not pay attention to that chapter. It was Pedro Valente who actually said, "Hey, he dedicates a couple of pages to nutrition." So he says that uh, it's self-defense. Part of it is also taking care of yourself, which is true. Like if I'm doing a lot of I'm training jujitsu or sambo, and then I'm doing a lot of drugs in return, and then something comes out, when I'm out and I'm just not, I'm itching or but whatever. I'm not gonna defend myself properly, or I'm just gonna go to a dark path with my addiction, and then possibly, stop training altogether. Or because I know people like that happen to them. But so in short, Maeda says, no tobacco, um, a lot of fruits and vegetables. He said limit meat, but I think he wanted to say like just go all on vegetarian. And he says don't eat too much till your stomach is super full. And he references a scientist and says this, and it's also spoken in the book Ikigai, which is finding your purpose, the Japanese way, and why they live so long. And I do tend to agree. Sometimes we tend to be a little bit gluttonous when we eat. Sometimes, the dish that you cooked or your wife cooked or your mom cooked, it's so good that you finish the first dish, you're immediately going there for a second round. But sometimes you get distracted, talk 5, 10 minutes later, you realize that no, I'm actually full. So we should actually pay attention to that. It's very important. It's also a great way to discipline yourself. But me personally, diet wise, whole foods, the less processed, the better. Obviously, don't buy things packaged. Cut your vegetables, cook them yourself. Unless you know that the frozen vegetables you're buying, they're fresh, nothing's added to them, etc. Here, for example, we are very lucky with frozen fruits and vegetables. And make sure your supplementation is correct. Vitamin D is very crucial for your mood, for your bones, for your immune system. A multivitamin, your omega-3s, your micronutrients. Now, vegan, vegetarian, etc. Everyone's going to say, no, this happened to me and I'm good. This happened to me and I'm good. Me personally, I like a more plant-based diet.
Excellent. On the subject that's similar is alcohol. And the reason
Midas has no to alcohol.
I was going to say, I'm myself not a big drinker, but culturally it's interesting because Carlos Gracie Sr., if I'm not mistaken, said never drink alcohol. If I'm not mistaken, Carlos Sr. said never drink alcohol. But a big part of the Japanese culture is drinking alcohol. Right. And obviously there's probably some Japanese people who don't drink alcohol, or there's some Japanese martial artists who decided they're not going to drink alcohol. But I've known plenty of great Japanese martial artists that drank a ton of alcohol because culturally it's just kind of part of the equation.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
You can be a great martial artist and yes, have bad habits. Kimura smoked. He chain smoked, I think, like a lot. He died of lung cancer. He was a heavy drinker as well. So, personally, I think you should be mindful of that because you cannot, personally, I think you cannot train yourself to for self-defense, doing all these push-ups and squats and, being very well conditioned and your technique is amazing, while on the other side of your life, you're slowly killing yourself. That just makes no sense, personally. In my neighborhood where I lived in Japan, yes, people were outside drinking, smoking, like everywhere, literally everywhere. You see, and especially on the weekends, because supermarkets open 24/7. So sometimes I'm late at night working in my apartment. I go down, to get something from the grocery store. And you always see, one guy in the corner throwing up and his friend, looking out for him but yeah, personally, I think it makes no sense to, now you want to have personally, I love a glass of wine, a red wine, but every day or every week or no. But especially like on special occasions, if 2 or 3 times a year, it's no problem. At least, sure, the ideal would be to just stop it altogether. And that's also another thing, the stigma. There's this stigma in society that if you don't drink, you're a loser. And people just don't want to hang out with you altogether, even when they stop inviting you for evenings because you're not going to drink and you're not going to have fun with them. No, you can sit down and talk with them. You can sit down and joke and have a laugh, even if you don't drink. If you're drinking tonic water or a sparkling water or a Coke. But yeah, I think it's mostly the stigma. Oh no, people won't hang out with me anymore, and that is unfortunately true in many cases. But like I said, it makes no sense to be sharpening yourself, mentally, ethically, physically in one part of your life, and the other part you're being incredibly destructive. Kimura was not a perfect man.
Great answer, like all the answers. Shadi, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome interview. I think a lot of people will benefit from listening to it and watching it. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.